why the topaz earrings led you to Madame Neander, and I can even see why the chipped tooth ruled out Graves as a suspect. But how in heaven's name did you deduce that a Guy Hetherington and a Madame Neander were one and the same person?
Most transparent, my dear Watson.
Well, I confess, I can't see it.
Pass the tea like a good fellow, will you? Do you remember when the maid asked Madame Neander for a light, just before the guests arrived?
Yes, I vaguely remember something.
Be that as it may, had your eyes been with Madame Neander, you would have noticed an involuntary movement of her right hand, as it half darted to her breast pocket.
Ah, but Madame Neander had no breast pocket.
Precisely, my dear Watson. A breast pocket is not a normal accoutrement on women's clothing, although it is fairly standard on a man's.
I'll say, Holmes, that was a piece of luck.
Luck had nothing to do with it, my dear Watson. He shook his old chap. Earlier that same evening, as the guests assembled in the great hall, do you remember how all the women arrived in a great bunch? Well, did you notice anything odd as they were standing before the looking-glass in that great hall?
Only that they were preening themselves like jackdaws, as they always do.
All but one.
A Madame Neander!
It was pitiful on Hetherington's part. I mean, what woman, who truly was a woman, would miss the chance of admiring herself in the glass? And that, I fear, was the fatal giveaway. No cream, Watson.
Well, I must say, he led us on a merry dance. For a while there, I thought we were goners. Still, I suppose it's always darkest before the dawn.
Not strictly true, Watson, eh? I mean, not meteorologically speaking. The hours between 3 a.m. and 4:15 are the hours of densest darkness, as the sun is furthest from both sunset and sunrise, just a twist of lemon.
Oh, dash it, Holmes. I wasn't talking about meteorological, or what's it called it, but about our hopeless situation. Before Lestrade strode in with 15 of his burliest constables and turned off the gas jets, I thought we were all for it.
And that's exactly what Hetherington would have liked you to think. But being as poor a scientist as he is a female impersonator, he failed to realize that when you have 12 people breathing out carbon dioxide, as we were doing in that crampstone cellar, the effects of vaporized cyanide are considerably diluted.
Do you mean that we wouldn't have snuffed it?
Not a chance, my dear Watson.
Well, I certainly didn't know that.
Neither did he. And since his aim was our collective asphyxiation, I didn't think it was prudent to volunteer the information. Have you studied?
Holmes, you astonish me.
Nonsense, my dear Watson. Any schoolboy using elementary intelligence and an applied grammar school education could have arrived at exactly the same conclusions. Assuming he was supremely gifted, of course. The only other time that clock refused to chime was the fateful day I set off for Reichenbach Falls for my last encounter with Professor Moriarty.
Now what could that...
An omen, Watson, that something untoward is about to happen.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Holmes. I hate to bother you, but it's this letter, Mr. Holmes, that Dr. Watson wrote. It's from me cousin Dundee. It seems my grandfather's in terrible condition and will probably not last out the week.
I'm so terribly sorry to hear that, Mr. Hudson. You were very close, were you?
No, not what you'd call close.
He was a distant relative then?
Not what you'd call distant.
Well, he was neither distant nor close.
Well, to tell you the truth, Dr. Watson, I hadn't even known my grandfather was still alive.
In that case, my dear man, why indulge in this charade of melancholy?
Well, Mr. Holmes, I'm very attached to all my relations because there's so few of them. The thought of any one of them passing is just terrible. Terrible!
What you mean is that you're hopelessly sentimental and haven't a clue as to whom you're actually wailing about.
That's not true, Mr. Holmes. I knew my grandfather very well. My mother spoke of him often. He was a caretaker by profession. Took great pride in tending to the flowers at the local cemetery.
Well, then pushing up the daisies could be construed as a continuation of his normal duties.
I hadn't heard a peep from him in nigh on 20 years.
Then that should make his passing all the more tolerable.
But it don't. It's very confusing to have to suddenly mourn for someone you never knew was still alive. No, it's just straight on your heartstrings.
I can quite see that, Mr. Hudson. Quite.
Do stop sobbing, Hudson.
I can't help it. My whole family's always been very emotional. They cry at weddings, anniversaries, baptisms, when they open the mail, when they eat dinner. You know, the usual. They could never contain themselves.
Incontinence, Hudson, is nothing to boast about.
Holmes, you're being deucedly callous to an employee and a good friend. Can't you see the poor man is in a state?
Is there something specific we can do for you, Hudson?
I must go to him.
I see.
He's asking for me. It says so in the letter.
I see, and how long do you suppose this pilgrimage will take?
I don't know. It only says he's near the end. I don't know where his outfits are going to. Passover?
Well, given the tendency of the Welsh not to part with anything already in their possession, he could linger on for a decade or two, and that would leave this flat in a rather disconsolate condition.
Holmes, how can you think of your own comfort when Mr. Hudson is so bereaved?
He isn't bereaved yet, Watson.
I must see the poor man if he's asking for me.
Of course you must. And now you go right along, Mr. Hudson. There's a train later this afternoon, and now we'll be able to cope quite well till you come back, and won't we, Holmes?
If you really feel you must, Hudson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Holmes. I knew you would understand.
Naturally, we will stop your wages until you return.
Holmes, really? I think you can do better than that.
And since you're leaving on a Wednesday, strictly speaking, I'm entitled to withhold this week's wages as well.
Oh, don't you fret, Mr. Hudson. Holmes likes his little jokes. And now you go right along. You can take my hansom. It's standing just outside. And if you need any assistance while in Dundee, wire me immediately.
You're a saint, Dr. Watson. You truly are.
Oh, do try to be philosophic, Hudson. If your grandfather is going to die, your bedside lamentations will only provide a relevant musical accompaniment. Whereas here on Baker Street, you're tending the living, who have a very real need of you.
I worry about you, Mr. Holmes. Oh, especially after you started smoking all that. You know what?
I beg your pardon?
Smells like flaming pig manure.
Your impertinence, Hudson, is almost as odious as your sentimentality. Take your week's wages and whatever expenses you feel you need and go tend the dying. God knows if it doesn't prepare them for heaven, it will give them a very tart foretaste of hell.
Oh, don't mind him, Mr. Hudson. We know how crotchety he gets after a bad case. And now you go right along, and if you need any assistance while in Dundee, just telegraph.
God bless you, Dr. Watson. Smells just like cat poo. Stinks to high heaven. Just wicked. Wicked.
Holmes, you behaved abominably to that old man, and you should be thoroughly ashamed of yourself.
Watson, your innate gullibility is quite the match for Hudson's Welsh guile. I've never heard such a cock and bull story in my life.
You don't believe him?
I do not speak of proof, Watson. But as we all know, the twin obsessions of the working class have always been absenteeism and tardiness.
If you're an emotional kind of person, Holmes, it's quite understandable to wish to visit an ailing relative.
It's more likely if you fancy a vacation with pay.
Well, he's hardly got that, has he?
Hudson, my dear Watson, has always known on which side his scone is buttered. They're a beastly lot, these Welsh. Thought by some to be the lost tribe of Israel, and there's good reason to believe it. They're mean, as tight as 6 toes in a sock. Welshmen have been known to return from the dead, to claim the pennies on their eyelids.
Holmes, I don't know what's been getting into you, but some of your views of late are almost balmy.
If all the timbers in the North American continent were laid end to end, it would never even begin to bridge the gap between my insights, Watson, and your perceptions.
Holmes, if I didn't know you better, I would take offense at every 10th word you uttered.
Which would make me fiercely scrutinize why the other 9 were having no effect. Drought! The first bitter fruit of Hudson's untimely departure. Now I must answer the door myself?
Don't fret, Holmes. You're getting to be like an old woman. I'll get the door. A hand-delivered letter?
Hand-delivered letter? That's unusual. It's too early for bills and yet much too late for birthday greetings. Hello?
What is it?
What indeed?
Well, what's it say?
It's from a Moriarty.
Moriarty, but he's dead. How could
Not the Moriarty. A Moriarty. A Mr. Simon Moriarty. The son, as it appears, of the deceased professor.
I never knew Moriarty had a son.
Villain that he was. I suppose he was still capable of biological reproduction.
Well, what's he say?
Quite a turn of phrase. A much better stylist than his late unlamented father.
I'll read it out. For goodness sake, Holmes. I'm dying of curiosity.
Mr. S. Holmes is the salutation. Blunt and to the point. Having recently returned from foreign parts, I have only just been advised of your role in my father's untimely death, which, to put a finer point to it, one could call murder. You should understand that the Moriarty clan was fired in the crucible of family pride, and the inevitable corollary of that pride is the appetite for revenge. A revenge which is implacable, and which neither God, nor man, nor Sherlock Holmes can possibly gainsay. Be advised, therefore, that appropriate measures will be taken to redress these heinous wrongs, and due punishment meted out to their contemptible instigator, your obedient servant, Simon Moriarty.
It's just a hoax. I wouldn't give it a second thought.
Hello, what's this? An enclosure. If you would know the hornet's sting, seek the insect in his nest, but do not dare to cut his wing, or never shall your heart know rest.
Balderdash! A hornet's sting, a cat his wing, a rabbit.
It stands no comparison with Tennyson, I grant you, but then again, the intention is quite different.
What intention?
If you would know the hornet's sting, seek the insect in his nest.
A poppycock, some crank. Now I shouldn't wonder.
But do not dare to cut his wing, or never shall your heart know rest.
A doggerel, a penny farthing rhyme.
And yet crystal clear in intent.
What do you mean, Holmes? I can't make heads or tails of this.
It means, my dear Watson, that within a very short period of time, only days perhaps, there is every likelihood that I shall be murdered. So sorry to have kept you. I find I can't go a day without Boccherini's minuet. One of my many addictions. You wish to see me?
Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
At your service, Mr.
Moriarty. Louis Moriarty.
Do take a seat.
I see my name has had some effect on you.
Did you expect that it should not?
Why, of course. I would have been quite astonished had it not.
Would you like some tea and scones?
Why, that would be splendid. It's been a rather...
Ah! My blasted butler is away! I'm afraid I shall have to withdraw that rather impetuous offer of hospitality.
No matter. I had half a glass of barley water before boarding the train.
Very prudent of you. And now then...
Mr. Holmes, I know you have received a letter from Simon.
Simon?
My brother.
I see. You are...
I am Professor Moriarty's other son.
Quite a prodigious progeny for a man who spent most of his life on the run. I'm sorry, I've touched a nerve.
Mr. Holmes, I cannot begin to defend my father. I, and the whole world beside, know what he was and what evil he wrought. But, when all is said and done, he was my father, and I still experience the old twinge of filial respect.
And so you should. The good that men do lives after them. The evil is often turned in their bones.
I believe you have that wrong way round, Mr. Holmes.
I know. I find Shakespeare so much more amusing that way. Would you like a little sherry?
Why, that would be refreshing. It's been a rather...
Blast! The sherry's all gone and that confounded old Harrington hasn't replenished the stock. I do apologize.
Not at all. Sherry is a trifle reckless so early in the day.
You were saying?
Simon, my brother. But first, Mr. Holmes, allow me to explain. I have only recently come to know my brother for being much given to self-abuse. He spent his formative years living in America. I have only renewed my acquaintance with him at a belated memorial service for my father.
Ah?
The Memorial Hall in Bermondsey.
Quite. I remember receiving the invitation, but unfortunately I was in Marrakesh at the time.
I was quite relieved. A parental tie, Mr. Holmes, is like a hoop of steel. And no matter how Christian one tries to be, I doubt I'd have been able to suppress a natural animosity towards the murderer of my father.
You do know the circumstances of our unfortunate encounter.
Perfectly, and there is no need for explanation. The reason my father never mentioned Simon or myself is surely self-evident. He felt if you, or members of the police, were made aware of our existence, our lives would become a torture, and every pressure imaginable would be put upon us in order to ferret him out. As neither I nor Simon had any knowledge of his whereabouts, these pressures, had they been exerted, would have been pointlessly cruel. To avoid that, my father never breathed a word of his progeny to anyone.
Your mother?
I was coming to that.
I don't mean to pry.
If anyone is entitled to these facts, Mr. Holmes, you certainly are. Do you remember the case of the vinegar-stained hatband?
Quite clearly.
Then you will recall that after a variety of unfortunate circumstances, you stalked my father to an old mill near Haddlesby, Dorset, where you temporarily lost the scent.
Yes, I remember it vividly. The search was called off for 5 days, and then Moriarty was sighted at Christchurch Abbey, disguised as a choir boy. He was uncovered by the beadle during a routine examination of the children's tunicles, and he fled immediately.
What you never knew was that during those 5 days, when he appeared to have vanished off the face of the earth, he was being hidden by a coloratura soprano, who used that old mill as a practice studio.
But where in heaven's name?
There was a trapdoor that led to an old cellar, and in that dark dungeon, my mother, who, due to the turbulence of her musical talent, was prevented from practicing anywhere else in Dorset, used to run scales from dawn to dusk. It was only after balancing on a precarious rafter for 24 hours that my father soon realized that he was not alone in that old mill. He heard the sounds of the diatonic scale emanating shakily from somewhere behind the mill, traced the sound to a trapdoor, and eventually found my mother. At first, she was frightened out of her wits. He made a clean breast of everything, told her he was being hounded by the police, and threw himself on her mercy. She immediately responded to his entreaties, being soft-hearted and Episcopalian. Having been hounded out of music schools throughout Dorset, she knew what it was like to be a man on the run. Nothing more would have come of this encounter, had it not soon transpired that my father possessed a plungent baritone voice and knew by heart most of the selections my mother had been practicing. Keeping up to a tremulous sotto voce, so as not to give away their whereabouts, the two began to perform a series of duets from Mendelssohn to Spohr. The softness of their tone, made necessary by the precariousness of my father's situation, gradually engendered an intimacy for, as you may know, Mr. Holmes, it is not possible to sing duets from Mendelssohn to Spohr in hushed tones without some kind of a bond springing up.
Quiet.
Before long, my father realized that he had met the woman of his heart. During a rather impassioned allegro vivace from Le Forza del Destino, my father, who virtually dissolved before the sway of Verdi, succumbed to my mother's E above high C, and intimacies followed.
But surely Moriarty didn't just leave after that.
Well, he had no intimation that his musical duet was to bear fruit, for despite his cunning and his guile, he was untutored in biological matters. It was only months afterwards that my mother had the courage to inform my father of the birth of twins.
But how did she manage to track him down again? He was, at the best of times, the most elusive of men.
Before he left at the old mill, he devised an ingenious scheme for communication by way of the personal column of the public prints. He instructed my mother to advertise the passing of various imaginary clergymen from remote parts of the British Isles using a code known only to him and her. And in this way, one fateful Sunday, he read the words, "In eternal and loving memory of Vicaras Bonaparte, late of Aberystwyth, now resident in paradise." He knew at once I had become the father of twins.
Your mother?
My life, no less than my father's, has been pockmarked with tragedies, Mr. Holmes. As a result of assistance from a mysterious benefactor, who was undoubtedly my father, my mother soon achieved the concert stage. She gave a premiere recital at the Wigmore Hall on the 24th of November, 1889.
24th of November, 1889. But wasn't that
You
the day-
remember it? I thought you might, though not half so well as I.
It was a macabre incident. There was a short notice of it in the Times, if I remember rightly.
During the last encore, as a result of a tremendous ovation in a rather unstable hall, the casters of the concert grand came loose from their moorings, and as the pianist hit the first chords of Spohr's Blumen and Menenherz, which as you probably know is a wild cascade of B-flats, the instrument came hurtling down upon the unsuspecting soloist, pinned her against the side of the stage, and lodged itself into her diaphragm. The hammers of the upper octaves were wedged lethally into her abdomen, and although a series of delicate operations managed to remove everything from E-flat to F above high C, the damage was irreversible.
A grim and fascinating account, sir. But I fail to see what all of
Has
this...
to do with you? I was just coming to that.
Pray do. Would you like an apple or some grapes, perhaps?
Why, that would be ingeniously magnificent.
Blast that man! Even the fruit bowl is drained dry. I am sincerely apologetic. I'm not usually so bereft, but my odious butler...
Think nothing of it. Fruit is somewhat binding before dinner.
Quite.
Constipation.
Precisely.
That letter, Mr. Holmes.
Letter?
I know all about it. Simon told me he was sending it, just as he described the gory details of the ruin he intends to wreak upon you. You must leave London at once.
My dear sir, I am touched by your regard for my welfare. But as you surely must know, a day without a threat against my life is like un jour sans soleil.
But so long as you remain here, he will continue to make attempts on your life.
And if I leave, why would he not pursue me? As indeed I pursued your notorious father.
Once he has had time to assimilate the shock, he will forego his desperate plans.
If he is a true Moriarty, and your story leaves little doubt on that score, he will pursue his fiendish aims to their preordained conclusions. Surely you must see that.
But I wish to make an end of this hideous enmity. My father is dead. My mother is dead. My brother is all I have left. And I know if he continues on this course, then he will surely come to ruin.
My dear Mr. Moriarty, I do understand your dilemma. But you do see, don't you, that I have no alternative but to defend my life if it is threatened.
There is one.
And that is...
If I can find him, if I can lead you to him, would you promise to reason with him? The actual confrontation with Sherlock Holmes would be enough to disperse his wild fancies.
And what if I cannot dissuade him? What if the sight of me so incenses him, he strikes immediately and eventually hangs for it? Then you will have the blood of two men on your hands.
If he cannot be dissuaded from his course, then I myself shall arrange for his detention, for I would rather have him under lock and key than standing trial for attempted murder.
My dear Mr. Moriarty, there is one aspect to this problem which you do not seem to have considered. I am Sherlock Holmes. That is a name and reputation well known throughout the British Isles, and I dare say beyond them. And you're asking me to go to this young hothead, your own description, and dissuade him from his vengeful course of action. The inference being to the uninformed that I fear his designs.
But you know that isn't true.
I know it, and you may know it, but the press invariably scrutinize the whole rather than the donut.
But if you can restrain Simon, I will tell the world the true circumstances. And when I have done that, your behavior, rather than smacking of cowardice, will be wreathed in magnanimity. Look, here is a boy whom you could have crushed, as you did our father. But instead you have given him a stern reprimand and an opportunity to mend his ways.
Put that way, I must say, it has a certain ring to it.
Will you do it?
Just a moment. You say if you can find him, but who's to say you can?
If anyone can find him, Mr. Holmes, I can. One nicely phrased item in the obituary column of the Times should do the trick. I have often heard that one of the things that made Sherlock Holmes, the great Sherlock Holmes, was that he managed to temper justice with charity.
My dear Mr. Moriarty, you are as eloquent as you are urbane. You have a bargain. Find me the young hothead, and I shall endeavor to cool his brow with the cold compress of reason.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Holmes. I'm eternally grateful. Mr. Holmes, if I cannot bring him to you in 2 weeks' time, I shall steel myself for the consequences of his actions and your own.
Good.
One last point. If Simon learned of my coming here, he would be furious. So when I next have news of him, rather than risk a return visit, I will send it by firing an arrow through your window.
And how, pray, will you manage that?
During a brief family reunion in Capistrano, my father taught me to fire arrows with messages written on them, expressly for that purpose, as he believed all written messages that were sent by normal means were certain to be tampered with. It was one of my father's many fanciful ideas.
On the contrary, I suspect that the theory is sound and may well account for the longueurs of our atrocious postal service. You know, it occurs to me that somehow, somewhere, I have seen you before. I'm sure it is your eyes. I see an excitement.
Everyone says I get them from my father.
Lestrade, you're making a bloody nuisance of yourself.
That is as may be, Holmes, but the fact remains. This letter constitutes a threat on your life, isn't it? And I'm obliged to take it seriously.
You may take it as seriously as you wish.
And so should you, Holmes. This is no ordinary crank, you know. This is the son of the most notorious scoundrel that ever prowled the streets of London. If he's even off the man his father was, he's a threat to every decent person for miles around. In any case, we've taken some subtle precautions.
If you're referring to those beefy bobbies you've posted outside my front door, Lestrade, I can tell you right now, they will have to go. All that brass and braid is lowering the tone of the entire neighborhood.
I could always put them into plainclothes, isn't it?
If your plainclothes aren't anything to go by, it would be a veritable slam.
You may think all of this is a big joke, but Dr. Watson and I...
Aha! So you consulted with Dr. Watson then?
When I received a copy of that letter, I felt it my duty to discuss the problem with all the people directly concerned.
Excluding myself, who is, of course, the most directly concerned.
Dr. Watson and I, in all of Scotland Yard, have your best interests at heart, Mr.
Balderdash!
Still, Dr. Watson and I thought it'd be a good idea. I wonder what's become of him. We arranged to meet here at 2:30. It's not like him to be late.
You arranged to meet here?
To try and persuade you to take some protective measures in this matter.
I must say, Lestrade, your cloying sense of paternalism is really becoming quite obnoxious. I have never before required the aid of Scotland Yard in my personal or professional dealings, and I would rather take a bullet to the head than have to deal with all this...
Stand back! There's someone in that closet.
Astonishing deduction, Lestrade.
He may be on.
Highly unlikely, or he wouldn't be thumping the door with his elbows.
Good God, Dr. Watson! What are you doing in there? How'd you get into that closet? Look at you! Who did this to you?
I believe the answer to all of those questions might very well be facilitated if you remove the guard from the poor fellow's mouth.
Watson, are you all right?
Drink.
By the torso, Lestrade, remember by the torso.
Good God, man. You look terrible. How long you been in that closet? Oh, you gave me a start, I can tell you. Gave me quite a turn, it did.
The ropes, Lestrade. Here, Watson, have another swig.
For God's sake, what's happened?
Well, I'm not at all sure. I was sitting in the study correcting a few pages for my next edition when I heard this buzzing against the window pane. I came in to have a look, opened the window, and the next thing I know, everything went black. Then about 2 minutes ago, I woke up, opened my eyes, and everything was still black. I started banging my elbows against the door, and then you came in.
Did you get a look at him, Watson?
Not a glimpse, I'm afraid.
This was no doubt the visitor at the window.
That? Why, that's just a dead worm, isn't it?
A hornet, actually, ingeniously glued to the outside of the glass in order to create as much racket as possible. You see, it's actually stung the glass.
A hornet?
Yes, you may recall, Watson. We were given notice of a hornet sting some short while ago in an unpublished piece of light verse.
Hey. What's all that about?
Nothing important, Lestrade. Go on, Watson.
Well, there's nothing more to tell. I opened the window, and then
whoever it was who arranged the hornet sting placed a small rag with chloroform over your face, tied you hand and foot, and bundled you into that closet, leaving the way he came in, across the window ledge to the drain pipe and down to the pavement. You can just smell the faint whiffs of chloroform on your lapel.
But who in heaven's name?
May I, Watson? I think this will contain the answer to all of our questions.
Allow! Pink his jacket, isn't it? Like a baby. What's it say, Miss Holmes?
It's addressed to myself.
Oi, but what's it say?
Nothing concerning you, old chap.
For God's sake, Holmes, I've got a perfect
To
right.
stick your nose wherever you please, Lestrade, but not into my personal post. And now I must insist that you call off your bulldogs at once, immediately. If this bumptious boy feels he has succeeded in rattling my composure and involving the formidable troops of Scotland Yard, it will only inspire him to new and more outrageous pranks. Whereas if we do nothing at all, he will eventually desist.
It could work in reverse, Mr. Holmes. If we paid him no mind, he might become even wilder in his schemes.
I can assure you, Lestrade, that within 48 hours the entire matter will be cleared up and Simon Moriarty in your custody. You must give me your word, Lestrade.
Mr. Holmes, I can't.
As an inspector.
I can't possibly.
As an Englishman.
It would be far.
As a servant of the Queen. Good man, Lestrade. Now hurry along through the front door as if nothing at all is amiss. No scowls, no furrowed brows. Try whistling as you stroll down the pavement.
Whistling? If I do, I'll have a dozen bobbies at my ears within seconds.
Quite right. Just hum quietly to yourself.
I don't know how to hum.
Then just make your way down the pavement looking stupid. That way, everything will appear to be normal.
Mr. Holmes.
I appreciate your cooperation in all of this, Lestrade, and I shall make a point of mentioning it to the Commissioner when we next have tea.
Mr. Holmes. Boy, look at this place. I really do miss Hudson.
Are you all right, Watson?
Yes. A little worse for the wear. It's not very cozy in that wardrobe.
Still, it was not a very long ordeal. I don't suppose you were out more than 10 minutes.
How do you know that, Holmes?
By the residue of the chloroform, which is only barely evident. Clearly your antagonist had no intention of inflicting any real harm.
But what's in the letter, Holmes?
Ah, yes, the letter. An accomplished scribe this young Moriarty is. One feels had he turned to literature rather than crime, he would have fared much better. As you can see, Mr. Holmes, I may penetrate your inner sanctum whenever I choose. Take this little encounter with Dr. Watson as a preamble to what is in store for yourself. Although you will not get off quite so lightly as your addle-brained stooge. Signed, Simon. Already on first name terms.
Addle-brained stooge. Oh, that little brat. You know, I've a good mind to give him a thorough
Don't
dredging.
you see, Watson? His entire purpose is to try to rattle us with these undergraduate hijinks. It's mere boorishness parading his wit. Could anything be more British?
This fellow may be a puling youth as far as you're concerned, but he is a Moriarty, and therefore there's no telling what he might do. Holmes, you're taking this far too lightly.
I realize you may still be a bit shaky, Watson, but shall you recognize the sound of the front door?
Shall I get it?
Why not?
What if it's...
Anybody who takes the trouble to scale the narrow ledge of a third-floor window in order to glue a hornet to the glass is not going to be so uncomplicated as to stroll right through the front door. Or would you like me to attend to it myself?
I'm going. Not a sign of anyone. Just this parcel left outside your door. What do you say to that, Holmes?
A rather conventional piece of stonework, not remarkable either for shape or texture.
Read it, Holmes. Read what it says.
In memory of Sherlock Holmes, who was rash enough to believe that he could outwit the son, even as he underestimated the father. Born June 1846, died September 1897.
And there's just one more week left in September.
What a bloody cheek!
Eh?
Diabolical audacity!
Don't let it upset you, Holmes.
Outrageous guard!
It's just a joke, and very poor taste, I must say.
Making me out to be 51 when I'm not a day older than 43. Eh? Watson, I want you to master every atom of scientific objectivity that you possess and answer me as truthfully as you know how. Do I look 51?
Holmes, I
Don't hedge, damn it, and don't stammer. Do I give the appearance of being a man well into the middle age, on the upper rungs of 50?
Don't fret, Holmes. I'm sure he just got his arithmetic wrong.
It's very well for a man of your advanced stage telling me not to fret. You'll never see 60 again.
Come, Holmes.
It's quite another thing for a man in the very prime of life to have a gauche youth proclaim in print that I have one foot in the grave.
Holmes, what's more important than the print on this morbid stone is the fiendish implication. The boy clearly means to do you in, no matter what his twin brother has to say.
There's very little weather in this face. No hairpin bends, no inroads to speak of. Even the smile is remarkably wrinkle-free. Wouldn't you say, Watson?
It's a darn striking face, Holmes.
There is no frost threatening the brow, there are no furrows. The back is straight and firm, like an exclamation point, not an interrogation mark. A goodly frame, wouldn't you say?
Olympic standard.
The luster in the eye is bright, the voice lubricious and resonant, winningly musical when it chooses to be.
A Covent Garden standard, and no one would dispute it.
And yet this snivelling, green guild boy dares to insinuate a chronology of 51 years.
Holmes, what are you going to do about this threat on your life?
Do, Watson? Why, we shall do nothing at all. Using the dirigible of our wider perspective and the helium of our lofty breeding, we shall rise above it.
But what about Louis Moriarty?
His description of his wayward brother's character appears to be quite accurate. We have made a proposal to him and we shall stick to it.
Holmes, I know you very well, and if there's anyone who can get round this puzzling case, it's you.
Believe me, Watson, my curiosity for Simon Moriarty grows daily. I shall quite relish the encounter when it does take place. As for now, I think I shall have a little smoke.
I see, well, in that case, I guess I'll be going. But I do wish that you take this a bit more seriously, Holmes.
Matters of life and death are but flotsam and jetsam. But a full pipe, my dear Watson, now that's a good smoke.
Who said that?
I did. Is your hearing defective?
I'll check in tomorrow.
Oh, do so.
And Holmes, be careful.
"51. I shall not rest until I have his neck in the palm of my hand.
Holmes, this is absolutely insane. Let me call Lestrade. At least tell him where we are.
That is expressly contrary to the instructions, Watson, and I do not wish to appear uncavalier. A flashlight.
But you know nothing about him. And this Simon? This crazy brother of his? I mean, who's to say he hasn't arranged the whole thing as a trap? Who's to say they aren't both in it together?
Watson, don't you think I've taken all the necessary precautions?
What precautions?
Every detail of Louis Moriarty's story has been checked. The mill in question does have an antechamber. It did have a small upright installed against one of its walls. The character of Moriarty's hands suggests an unstable personality with marked proclivity towards rash action. The P's and T's are precisely those of a man consumed with revenge, whereas the I's and O's of Louis Moriarty's hand in this letter informing us of this tryst, as so conveniently received by bow and arrow, of course, are those of an honest and straightforward person with unblemished character. So far, the pieces fit together quite correctly.
But look at this place, Holmes. I mean, who's to say that this man, the man who wrote that letter, hasn't lured you here to wreak the very revenge you say is burning in his bosom? I beg you, Holmes, let me bring Lestrade if anything should happen.
Yes, Watson?
Well, need I spell it out for you, Holmes? Not a soul in the world knows where we are, and if Louis Moriarty has been leading you up the garden path, we may be in grave danger.
When Professor Moriarty left this vale of tears, all real danger left with him. There never was and never will be an intellect quite so toxic as his, and while he lived, oh my life was in constant danger. But now that he is gone, there is no one, no thief, no assassin, no confidence trickster so deadly that he cannot be disarmed by my superior intelligence. Now, one may call that arrogance.
Indeed one may.
But, like all my other observations, it is founded on verifiable fact.
But Holmes, where are we anyways? And why did we have to come such a roundabout route? We'll never find our way back.
Like his father, the boy has a flair for the melodramatic. This is the only place he would agree to meet his brother, and he couldn't risk rousing his suspicions by suggesting another locale.
If what Lewis said is true, but what if it isn't? What if the two of them
Would it put your heart at ease if I told you that the meeting was set for 11 p.m.?
11? But it's only 7:30.
Exactly. I wanted to be here well in advance of either Lewis or his brother. If, indeed, there is a worm, which I doubt, the early bird, I am led to believe, has the odds-on chance of catching him.
Thank God you're still ticking away up there, Holmes. Well, shall we go?
Certainly not.
But they won't be here till close on midnight.
Exactly. And therefore no traps can be devised.
Darn it, Holmes. I really don't know where I am with you. One moment you say there's nothing to fear, and the next you're talking about traps being set.
Look at this. What have we here?
Some kind of barber's chair, isn't it?
Or a dentist chair, some such.
Check the floor, Holmes. Make sure there's no trapdoors or anything.
I already tested them with my heel boot a moment ago. Quite solid.
What about the exit?
There's only this one winding staircase coming from the street above, and I examined the door when we entered, and it appears to be perfectly sound.
It's awfully dank in here, Holmes. I mean, why couldn't we just meet at a pub or something? What's this here, Holmes?
A broom closet, I expect. Firmly locked from the outside.
What have you got there, Holmes?
A stethoscope, my dear Watson. Surely you are familiar with the breed. Although in the highly sophisticated form you see before you, capable of discerning the sound of human breathing at a distance of 20 feet. No, quite still.
I say, Holmes, I've never seen one of those before.
It's not your standard piece of equipment at St. Bart's, I should imagine, having invented it myself only 6 months ago. Good. We are quite alone at the moment, and so long as we remain here until the Moriartys arrive, there is no chance of any unexpected arrivals.
Holmes, what if the boy gets out of hand?
Out of hand, Watson?
Yes, what if he becomes incensed and tries to do the job right here and now? How will you ward him off?
You are fiendishly inquisitive, Watson.
But I'm not made of iron like you, Holmes. I'm quite mortal and quite frightened.
If the boy does attempt a lunge of any sort, I think my own jiu-jitsu training will be equal to the situation. Should it not be, this ring will do the trick.
Hit him with that? Oh, good God, Holmes, it will barely scratch him.
Not hit him with it, Watson. Spray him with it. A carefully prepared solution of sodium sulfate and spirit of ammonia issues forth from a tiny spout within the heart of this ingenious ring, causing severe blindness and sensory dislocation.
I say, Holmes, I'm continuously amazed by your knowledge of chemicals. How in heaven's name did you come by it?
They are easily prepared solutions available at any chemist shop without prescription. But Watson, you're dealing with chemicals all day long. Surely you know how simple a matter it is.
Confound it, Holmes. I'm dealing with sophisticated chemicals, not penny-farthing oils and ointments.
The characteristic of great minds, Watson, is the ability to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. A bit like changing water into wine.
What's this here, Holmes?
What, Watson?
On the chair, some leather.
My feet! They're trapped! Oh, it's a Le Frontenac chair.
Le Frontenac?
Developed by a demented French dentist in the early 60s to enable him to entrap a young girl who consistently rejected his advances. When he sat her down, ostensibly to fill her cavity, it closed up on her, much like this one does, and then, to the best of my recollection, he proceeded with his disgusting plot. Good God! An amazing replica! If replica it is. Well, I must say, this does put a slightly different complexion on the charming Louis Moriarty and his whole business. I'm afraid your own fears were, in this instance, a bit more prudential than my own. It obviously pays to be early. Now, how to get out of this thing?
But is that possible, Holmes?
Is what possible, Watson?
What you just said.
What did I just say?
About my own fears being, in this instance, more prudential than your own. That's never happened before, that I should have come up with some kind of conclusion which was correct before yourself. Or, as it is in this case, by means of a completely original deduction.
I don't wish to be rude, dear boy, but perhaps we could continue the analysis a little later.
Oh, but it's really quite astounding if it's true. I mean, deductions are, always have been your own special providence, your speciality, one might say. I can usually recognize them after the events, but never beforehand. That is quite out of character.
Watson, these straps are rather tight.
I know! I made them just so they would pinch your skin enough to produce a slight discomfort, but not outright pain. And yes, you were quite right, yet again. Spot on, in fact. It is the Le Frontenac chair, recently part of a medical exhibition at St. Bart's, and a popular item it was, too. Not that anyone will miss it, as it's already gone back to Birmingham, or so the officials believe, and as you can see, it is quite binding.
Since everything has an explanation, I assume this action has one as well.
Undoubtedly, my dear Holmes, but isn't it curious that it's one that has not occurred to you? Why is that, I wonder? Well, I shall tell you, and perhaps you will find it elementary, because for me, for whom so many things have been elementary, this is the most elementary thing of all. You consider yourself quite a sleuth, dear Sherlock, and quite observant. Very good at uncovering clues, sifting evidence, observing details, but now how is it that through all of your many exploits, or shall I say our exploits, you never noticed one recurring symptom, a trait which was present at every single case with which you dealt? I refer to a wince. A slight infinitesimal shiver which ran through my nervous system every time you asked me to corroborate a brilliant discovery of your own. A wince which punctuated every deft comment you ever uttered in correcting the muggy little obscurities and confusions of my own pathetic mind. A wince which, if it could speak, would have said, "You arrogant, supercilious, egocentric, narcissistic, smug, and self-congratulatory blackguard, how you enjoy lording it over your slow, treacle-minded aide-de-camp, your selfless, fawning, ever-faithful Boswell, for whose benefit you paraded your brilliance and your ingenuity." Oh God, I can just imagine how insufferable Johnson was to his faithful recorder, slowing down to make sure he got every word of the telling epigram, every nuance of the well-turned phrase. Starts very slowly, you know, very gradually, the way all great vendettas begin. A slight here, a sarcasm there, the ego first rubbed the wrong way, then bruised, then battered, then seething with convulsions of rage and dark dreams of revenge. A chance remark to Lestrade, the point of which is, you noticed and I didn't. A passing remark to a mutual friend, the inference of which is, certain minds can grasp the innuendo, others cannot. And then, gradually taking for granted your superiority, and taking equally for granted my backwardness, my doziness, my innate lack of perception. But who am I? Did you ever ask the question, or did you ever answer it further than saying, my lackey, my shadow, my ever-faithful lapdog? I am a doctor of medicine. I trained, I studied, I was honored at university, I received certificates, I won awards. When I walked down a hospital corridor, then I was no flunky, no lapdog, but a respected member of the medical profession with a flair for literature and an enviable intellect. But then, after you insinuated yourself onto my personality and into the minds of everyone who knew me, I was those things no longer. I was bumbly old Watson, the good-natured stooge of that detective. Oh no, not Watson, Holmes. Watson's the other one, the dull chap who never seems to get it quite right. Are you beginning to understand now the enormity of your crime, dear Sherlock? Beside it, everything Moriarty ever conceived or execute pales. And nothing can redeem it. Nothing but the supreme penalty.
Watson, you don't seem to have learned very much from your years of what I suppose you would call servitude. Do you really believe you will get away with whatever preposterous action you are contemplating?
I am certain of it, my dear Holmes, because I have learned from the master.
When Louis Moriarty gets here and finds...
Louis Moriarty? Oh God, you really are priceless, my dear Sherlock. His name is Bernard Walmsley. Oh, you don't know the name? Oh, why should you? A poor out-of-work actor, grateful for any role that affords some small remuneration, even if it is playing a fictitious character named Louis Moriarty, or bumbly old Dr. Watson, given to playing practical jokes on his dear old friend, Sherlock Holmes. Obviously underrated as an actor, for he took you in quite well, but then again I rehearsed him, so I suppose the credit really is all mine. It did take a while finding a pale, fine-boned young man. I did take pains, you know.
But That old mill in Dorset.
Is 2 miles from the medical institute I visit every summer. 6 months ago, I arranged for an upright piano to be stored in his antechamber.
But I read that article in the Times.
Which I had no doubt you would. It refers to an absolutely true incident in which an unfortunate contralto was the subject of a rather grotesque accident. That part of the story is entirely true, but I'm afraid the other details of her background are my own somewhat melodramatic invention.
And that letter from Simon
Was so aptly as you put it, the work of a man consumed with revenge. Knowing full well that you would use your expert powers to analyze that scroll, and since my scheme called for just such a character, I took it upon myself to write that letter in longhand. It was bravado, I grant you, but you see, I banked on the fact that throughout all these years, you have been so consumed with your own affairs, and so oblivious to mine, that never in 1,000 years would you have recognized my hand. After all, Holmes, handwriting, as you yourself have taught me, is something very personal to a human being, and since throughout all these years you have never recognized me as a human being, there was no chance you would recognize my hand. No, Holmes, the reason why I will always be the last suspect on your list is because for you, I am an invisible man. Like a doormat is invisible until you need it to wipe your boots on.
And you honestly believe that Mr. Wansley, or whatever his name is, will really keep your little secret?
Certainly not, my dear Holmes. Out-of-work actors are as untrustworthy as long-suffering general practitioners. It was important to select a performer who would not be around to stoke up any old coals. Mr. Walmsley fitted the bill perfectly, as he is suffering from acute consumption and has barely 6 weeks left to live. A diagnosis which I carefully carried out before recruiting him onto my project. The sum of money I have provided for his assistance has already enabled him to set sail to Australia, a country in which medical science is so backward that there is no chance of him obtaining proper treatment. In 2 weeks, he'll be coughing up blood. In 4, he will be bedridden. In 6, it will all be mercifully over. The straps on that thing are quite ingenious, I assure you. Almost as ingenious as my own knots when I tied and gagged myself in that closet and sprinkled a few drops of chloroform onto my lapel, where I knew without fail you would discover them. A bit extreme all that, but I knew it would appeal to your sense of melodrama. God, it took hours to learn to tie that arrow to. Long, harsh training, and doctoring that bloody cuckoo clock wasn't easy either.
Watson, I think I have underrated you all of these years.
Oh, thank you, master. A praise from Sherlock Holmes is praise indeed.
But you really mustn't carry on in this fashion, because in spite of everything you've just said, I still harbor some affection towards you, and I would hate to think of you winding up in the dock charged with murder.
So would I, my dear Holmes, and that's why I've taken all the necessary precautions.
Have you? And how will my disappearance be explained to others?
The fact is, Holmes, apart from other skills acquired in your service, I have become an expert calligrapher. I've got your own handwriting down to a T, and I, or rather you, have written the following letter, which will be found at your Baker Street flat tomorrow morning, I expect. It reads as follows. Since the death of Professor Moriarty, I have found no challenge in the art of detection. Each case has rather been a repetition of former triumphs. Therefore, in my last communication to the world, I want it to be known that I intend to dismantle the personage that has become Sherlock Holmes. So this is the last you will ever hear of him in that guise. I am going off to start a new life in another land with another name and an entirely unremarkable personality. For all future inquiries, I direct you to my trusty colleague, Dr. Watson, without whom my career would have taken quite another course. I like that last touch, don't you?
And you honestly believe that will settle the matter? Why, there will be a tremendous search through every continent of the world to seek me out.
Yes, my dear Holmes, and in every metropolis you will be heard from, you will be found time and time again. In Hong Kong, in Minneapolis, in Innsbruck, in Sydney. It will always be Sherlock Holmes, and it will never be you.
And do you honestly believe that my friend would be such a...
Friends? What friends, Holmes? Lestrade? Hudson? You have no friends. No, Holmes, your only friend is myself, and I shall see to it that your memory remains untarnished. I shall never deflate the myth that has become Sherlock Holmes, and you can be sure of that. Oh, and by the way, all of this could have been avoided if you had heeded my prophetic little quatrain. If you should know the hornet's sting, seek the insect in his nest. And what other insect is there in your disheveled nest but myself? A hornet buzzing out your story to the world.
I suppose I never unraveled that puzzle, because I could never think of you as a hornet. Oh, a worm now. That would have been a better clue.
Oh, do I detect the first little nuggets of spite? I think I do. How welcome they are!
When Hudson returns to London,
You will have mysteriously disappeared, and no one will be more desperate or forlorn than I. By then, of course, he will have realized that letter about his dying grandfather to be a cruel hoax. Another one of my ingenious literary inventions. But his capacity for lamentation will not be wasted, as he'll have you to mourn and me to commiserate with. You must admit, Holmes, it is a grand design. Perhaps the grandest design ever concocted by the mind of man.
you are quite mad. Quite mad.
I know that. My own scientific objectivity tells me so. quite mad. But as it is with all madness, the first question the doctor must answer is whence came the disease? What is its root and its cause? You are the root and the cause of my madness, your arrogance and your pride. And when I realized that, although quite mad, I was on the road to recovery, for I decided to pull out the roots of my disease where I found them. Oh, those straps are quite unbreakable, I assure you. Old Le Frontenac took no chances. He was really set on that girl, you know. Yes, my dear Holmes, only sophisticated chemicals in my laboratory, like this ingenious mixture, for example, concocted by myself, which kills within seconds and within a matter of hours, thoroughly and efficiently eradicates human flesh, leaving a whittled down skeleton, like a chicken bone, plucked clean. Now, of course, to do its job efficiently, it must not be diluted with oxygen, and therefore, my dear Holmes, I've taken the precaution of turning the cellar into an airtight chamber, which when I leave, using a wax especially designed for the purpose, seal the framework of that door, rendering this already dank and arid cellar entirely airless. I doubt anyone will venture upon the place, as it is condemned property due to be demolished in 2 or 3 years. By then, some chance discovery of a skeleton might create some small flurry of interest, but there will be no way to connect those corroded bits of calcium to the great Sherlock, and therefore no serious publicity. Oh, I'm so sorry about that, Holmes. I know how much you were looking forward to the posthumous notoriety.
Watson, I have listened very carefully to everything you have just said.
Well, you couldn't very well do otherwise.
And I really must compliment you. You have devised what, in my professional opinion, is a perfect crime. Your preparations meticulous. Your choice of performers, the witting and the unwitting, expertly made. But in all your calculations, you seem to have lost sight of one rather important fact.
Oh, here it is. The ultimate coup de grace that makes 50 million readers tremble with delight and boggles the minds of criminologists from Peking to Peru.
You say you were an underling, and you say you resented it. And yet this, the most remarkable act of your life, could have only come about because of me. Because of my influence and my instruction.
Because of your arrogance and your pride.
Call it what you will, but who made you remarkable? Who permitted you to stand out from the rest of your fellow men? It was I. It was proximity to myself that gave you whatever credence you had. Without that, you were nothing.
So you say, Holmes, and so you believe.
You said as much yourself. Without Sherlock Holmes, there is no Dr. Watson. If you kill me, you destroy the only thing that gives meaning to your life.
On the contrary, my dear Holmes, your death is the only thing that can possibly restore meaning to my life. However, don't let me interrupt. The acid is almost ready.
You think you're so unique, so especially exploited, but there are millions like you, because you're the drones of the universe. And there are only a handful like me. One sensibility like my own is worth 50 million of yours. Yours only has value in so much as it is touched by mine. Without my coattails, you drag in that gutter. Without my heightened sensibility, you remain but a clod of earth. You should get down on your knees and thank God that your pathetic and paltry span of time on this earth was made remarkable by exposure to Sherlock Holmes.
Go on, Holmes, and go on. This is the music I wanted to hear.
Yes, I ignored you, neglected you, took you for granted, spat upon you. What were you but a sounding board for ideas that you could never in a million years have invented yourself?
Go on, Holmes, and go on. Sing, sing.
Elementary, my dear Watson, is what you always were, composed of brute and basic elements. Earth, air, water, but never fire. That is the one element that you always lacked. That is what I gave you. Or rather, you sucked it up out of the conflagrations of my intellect. For years, you warmed yourself with my coals, read by the sparks of my flame, and lived by the heat of my fire.
Dust we are, and to dust we return. Elementaries is not, my dear Holmes. Very elementary.
You cannot destroy essence! I am essence! I am the incarnation of life! And you are dross. You are earth. Blood. Stool. Dung. Dust. Dust!
Tea, Dr. Watson?
Oh, no thank you, Mr. Hudson. I've had 2 cups already, and then just wolfing down the 4th of your delectable Danishes. Fit for a king. Oh, and while we're on the subject, I shall now read you one of the letters you were so kind enough to deliver to me this morning.
Is it from Mr. Holmes? Have they found something?
Patience, patience. You see the seal.
Is it?
None other.
What could it really be from the past?
Attend. In respect of the magnificent work conducted by Mr. Sherlock Holmes through his eventful career both here and abroad, and the invaluable participation of his trusted aide-de-camp, referring to me, of course.
Oh, precisely.
Her Majesty the Queen wishes you to accept a knighthood in the next birthday honors list, so that the world may witness the esteem in which the monarch holds the memory of this great sleuth and his conscientious collaborator. That, of course, is me again.
Yes, of course.
We will be contacting you in due course to organize the details of the event. Signed, Lord Privy Seal, for Victoria Regina.
God's truth! Is it true?
Seems pretty authentic to me.
What does it mean, Dr. Watson? That from now on, you're to be... Good Lord!
Lordships are a step or two ahead, Mr. Hudson. But yes, it does mean Sir John Watson.
Oh dear. What would Mr. Holmes say, I wonder? If he were here right now?
Something rather cutting, I suspect.
Oh boy, dear Mr. Dr. Watson. I keep thinking to myself, one day, I'll hear his tread on the stair. He'll swing open the door and shout down to me like he always did. "Wake me boots, you slowly old ox!" Do you remember?
An endearing harshness of manner which concealed a heart as big as a bun, but a life must go on, as indeed it has for these past 18 months, and I must say, Mr. Hudson, you've been a brick through it all.
I know. That's what Mr. Holmes would have wanted me. To soldier on here at Baker Street, no matter what. And wasn't it just wicked, that fellow from Bognor pretending to be Mr. Holmes and getting our hopes up like that?
A thorough-packed scoundrel. I knew in a trice he couldn't be home.
But he looked a spit-in image, didn't he, Doctor? Got the voice down pat, and even the clothes.
Yes, but when he offered to take us all down to Cafe Royale and pick up the check himself, he showed his hand.
And that hussy from Margate, getting herself into man's clothing to boss herself off as Mr. Holmes. Oh, the cheek of that hussy!
An outrageous sally, which, thanks to my well-kept anatomical records, was quickly exposed for the fraud it was.
I just can't figure the number of wicked people in the world. Like whoever it was that wrote that letter about me dying grandfather. And when I got there, I found out he died 10 years earlier and not a farthing left me in the will. Who could have thought up such a wicked thing?
Some warped and embittered individual, Mr. Hudson, with some great imaginary grievance.
Oh, Dr. Watson, you do still think he's alive, don't you? He will come back one day, won't he?
Of course he will, Mr. Hudson. You know what they say about that penny. Oh, really, Mr. Hudson? You must learn to restrain yourself. If every mention...
It's not that, Dr. Watson. It's the ceremony.
The ceremony?
I haven't a coat to be going to the palace with.
Well, I'm sure we can stretch the housekeeping far enough to purchase an appropriate coat for the Queen.
You really think so?
Sure. It's not every day we're summoned to Buckingham Palace.
Wow, a new coat? Well, should it be striped, a colourful, plain, fair, pink? I like pink. Pink's a nice colour, it's good for my complexion. Should it be long, short, long, short? Long probably fits my physique a little more, that's important. God, so many choices. Should it be a 3-piece suit or a 4-piece suit? 4-piece suit? God, what's a 4-piece suit? Do they even make 4-piece suits? God, what's the 4-piece? Well, I'll probably need a hat. Hey, the hat's the 4-piece. Or should it be a striped hat, a fedora, silk topper, fedora, bowler hat, fedora. Fedora. I like the name Fedora. What do you think, Dr. Watson? I've been talking a lot. You say something.
Well, since it is Victoria, I think grey and a bowler might be more appropriate. It's the telephone, Hudson, and not the door. It's probably the palace.
The palace?
Go on, go on. It won't bite you.
The Holmes residence, Your Royal Highness. Here? Oh, it's you. It's Inspector Lestrade.
Good morning, Inspector. I suppose you've heard on the grapevine, eh? And no doubt your own time will come, and there's no reason to... Found him? What, you found him? How about Lestrade? We've been through this a great many times before, and now how can you be sure that... What, amnesia? Bombay? But Inspector, I think we're wasting a great deal of time over... Well, of course, if you think it's urgent, I'll come over and help with the identification. You brought him here? Or downstairs? Now, do you really think that... I see, test him on his home ground, quite right. Well, I certainly hope this isn't another wild goose chase, Inspector. Fine. Goodbye.
They found him! He's back!
Now-
I'll go get his room ready.
Now, we've been through this a great many times before, Mr. Hudson, and have always been bitterly disappointed.
But Lestrade, He's never brought any of them over to the flat.
Now, if we keep our wits about us, we'll be able to deal with this imposter.
But what if it ain't no imposter? What if it's really Mr. Holmes?
Well, in that case, of course I'll be delighted, we both will. But all I'm saying is that for the moment it's best to remain skeptical, as to avoid a disappointment afterwards. Oh, and it's probably best if you make yourself scarce for the moment, Mr. Hudson. It's going to be a rather delicate interview.
Of course, Dr. Watson.
Door, Hudson!
Spectre?
Hudson?
Oi!
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 Really?
Yeah.
Well, all right then.
So glad you could accommodate us, Dr. Watson. He's just outside.
These false alarms are becoming very trying, Inspector. Must we really waste time?
I tell you, Dr. Watson, the man is the spitting image of ours. I've been took in 3 times before, so I'm not about wasting my time with all that lot. But I tell you, this resemblance is positively uncanny.
That's what you said the last time, when that fellow's makeshift plastic surgery began to wilt in the gaslight. He too was a spitting image.
But he's got the manner, the walk, the tone of voice, even if he is a bit scruffy. Oi, he's told me things about myself in the yard, even my wife don't know.
A few months of intensive research and almost any tubercular chap can pass himself off as Sherlock Holmes.
Well, it's just as I thought, isn't it? So I says to myself, Lestrade, I says, don't mock around with it. Give him the old Watson test straight off.
When you talk to yourself, Inspector, do you call yourself Lestrade?
I suppose I do.
The thing is, Inspector, that I have a great many...
The thing is, Doctor, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't investigate all of these chaps. Just imagine that Holmes did come back, and he was just shunted aside. Didn't get a proper look-in, as it were. That wouldn't go down very well with the superintendent or the British public, I expect.
Very well, Lestrade. Show the gentleman in.
Many thanks, Doctor. I do really appreciate it. May I introduce Watson, old man? How good to see you after so many months. What an escapade. Why, you'd hardly believe it when I tell you. Frankly, I can hardly believe it myself. I say the place looks as ever. Is Hudson about? I've actually been looking forward to seeing the old fool. First time that's ever happened as far as I can recall. I say, is that my pipe?
Do have a seat.
Well, Dr. Watson, this is the gentleman of whom I spoke. He has a very interesting story to relate, and I told him it'd be best if he told it himself.
Quite.
So come along, old chap. There's no need for all this standing on ceremony. Why, surely I haven't changed that much. You certainly look the same. A bit better fed, perhaps. The firm has been getting on splendidly without me. Much trade.
Before we become too deeply enmeshed, Mr. Holmes, may I remind you that you are not the first person to try to pass himself off as the Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, bother it, Watson. We both know all those others were sheer adventurers, for it's distinction enough being the Sherlock Holmes, but being the returned, resuscitated, and restored Sherlock Holmes is the very height of achievement for any self-respecting imposter. And the money's quite good too, unless you've been fiddling the accounts.
The accounts are in perfect order. But before we discuss the accounts, or anything else for that matter, may I remind you that although there is a striking resemblance to the man whose name you seem to bear, that has happened before, to no avail. Now, you are aware, no doubt, that modern science has recently perfected the art of skin grafting, by which Almost anyone who can afford it can have whatever face he chooses.
Is that really the case?
It is.
Well, I say, Lestrade, there's still hope for you. Hey. The point at issue here is your mug, not mine.
And not only, as Lestrade puts it, your mug, but a great many other things, and therefore, Mr. Holmes, I wonder if I could put a few questions to you. No doubt you will come up with a perfectly good answers.
Holmes interrogated? Why, that's quite a switch.
Perhaps, Inspector, you'd be good enough to wait outside. There's a sofa in the hall.
If you like, Dr. Watson, but wouldn't it
I think it would be most convenient.
Lestrade has been behaving very peculiarly for the past 12 hours. If I weren't certain of his gender, I'd say he's beginning to show the first signs of a menopause. I do hope, Watson, we won't take too long to break the ice.
I certainly hope not, Mr. Holmes.
Come, old man. Surely we can drop all of these formalities.
Now, I should like to retain them a little while longer.
As you like.
Now, I've heard that you've had some sort of encounter at sea. Is that correct?
It was the damned awfulest thing you could have imagined. I was standing by the warping stairs when a grey Sikh in a striped jabula hit me on the head with a yard arm and tossed me in a boat bound for Bombay. When I awoke, I had a bump on my head the size of a Blarney stone and no idea whatsoever who or where I was. The blighter had gone through my pockets and taken not only a minuscule bankroll, but all of the papers of my identification as well. The captain concluded I was a stowaway, put me to work at the galley, shaving potatoes and plucking cabbage leaves. I'd be there still if the ship's doctor hadn't recognized me. Began putting all kinds of questions about Baker Street, Baskersville, and speckled bands. Oh, I thought the chap was balmy. When he asked me down to his cabin to try on some clothes he gathered at the port, I grew quite alarmed. I fully expected corsets, or bras, or brigiers, you know, weird stuff. But found instead a half-cape greatcoat and a deerstalker. When I donned the garments, he clapped his hands and cried, "Eureka! I found him!" The next thing I knew, I was scuttled off the ship, brought back to England, and placed in the rather dubious custody of that man they call Lestrade. I can't say I'm entirely back to normal, though, whatever that may be, but I am now prepared to believe that I am Sherlock Holmes of 221 B. Baker Street, and you are my friend and companion, John Watson.
Whether I or anyone else is prepared to believe it remains a moot point.
Well, I say, Watson, you seem to have developed your powers of deduction miraculously since we last met.
And have you any memory of that?
Of what, old chap?
The last time we met?
You've really got me there, old bean. Perhaps you could refresh my memory.
Well, I don't see how it's very irrelevant one way or the other. The point is not where we last met, but whether or not you are the man you claim to be.
Well, I dare say, old chap, I'm a little wobbly in that area. I've only just come round, as it were, but all of the available evidence leads me to believe that I am the person in question.
Well, perhaps we can verify that.
How so?
Now, I've drawn up a short questionnaire which has been useful in the past in determining the identities of a would-be Sherlock Holmes. Now, I wonder if you'd be good enough to submit yourself to a few questions.
Is it like an examination?
Yes, you could call it that. A sort of legitimacy test.
But is it very reliable, Watson?
It has never before failed in exposing imposters. Not that you, Mr. Holmes, are one.
Well, I say, it sounds quite ingenious. Would this be one of your own creations, Watson?
Yes, I'm proud to say it is.
Well, I'm all expectations.
Given all the information readily available on Holmes's background, it would not be too difficult for one to acquire all the facts they might need. Therefore, these questions are in no way concerned with the statistics of Holmes's, your past life, but rather his, your character and personal idiosyncrasies, information rather more difficult to come by. You are game, I take it.
Perfectly.
Excellent. Sitting comfortably. Good. If you were offered a trip around the most romantic capitals of the world, I were permitted to bring along only one special companion. Whom would you choose?
My bank manager.
Imagine you're on your deathbed, surrounded by mourners with only 1 minute left to live. What would you ask for?
A second opinion.
Now, let us assume that a fairy godmother appears and offers to grant you 3 wishes. What would you ask for first?
Her credentials.
Now, let us assume that you have a £5 note in one pocket and a half-crown in the other, and the starving woman across you on the street begging for help. What do you give her?
Is she plain or fair?
What?
The beggar woman. Is she plain or is she fair?
What difference does that make?
If she were plain, no, I'd give her the half-crown.
And if she were fair?
Well, I don't mean to be rude.
You step into a railway compartment in which there are only 3 vacant seats. One beside a drunken Irishman, another beside a shabby rabbi, and the third alongside a foul-smelling Ethiopian gentleman with fleas. And what do you do?
Pull the emergency cord at once!
Complete this sentence. A friend in need.
An insufferable bore.
A rolling stone gathers.
Well, rather more than I'm gathering from all these daft questions.
There's an Irishman, a Scotsman, and a Jew.
Oh, I know that one, Watson. Whatever you do, don't make away.
Now, I would appreciate it, Mr. Holmes, if you fastened your attention to the matters at hand.
Sorry, old chap.
Now, I'm going to give you a list of words, and I would appreciate it if you answered me with the very first word that came into your head. Understand?
Beeswax!
I haven't started yet! Windy,
Macintosh.
Waterloo,
Napoleon.
rainstorm,
Wellington.
Africa,
Gun boots.
Siberia,
Coconuts.
danger,
Banana skin.
kidnap,
Sleeping goat.
strangulation,
Tight underpart.
imposter,
Prove it.
poison,
English cooking.
embezzlement,
Coconuts.
women,
Crocodiles.
marriage,
Quicksand.
honeymoon,
Well blubber.
mother-in-law,
Elephants.
corsets,
Coconuts.
fame,
Money.
poverty,
Fame.
money,
Poverty.
success,
Shippers.
celebrity,
Antelope.
security,
Pussycat.
bullion,
Ole horse.
posterity,
Coconut.
enema,
Coconut.
emeralds,
Coconut.
a golden dash.
You got me on that one.
Would you care for some tea?
Don't mind if I do.
A milk and sugar?
No, thank you.
What have you got there, Holmes?
This, my dear Watson, is a little delicacy from Morocco. The natives call it happy syrup.
Would you care for a smoke?
Very decent of you.
I need some happy stuff.
It's been a long time since I've had a real good smoke.
Holmes, it really is you. I just couldn't bring myself to believe it. There had been so many dash hopes.
Quite understandable, Watson, and your skepticism does you credit.
We heard rumors from Calcutta, Saint-Tropez, Brisbane, but they all came to naught.
No doubt, let's have a go at being Sherlock Holmes industry has prospered greatly over the past few months. But how have you managed all of the cases without me?
Inadequately, of course. Our clients knew that they would never receive the first-class service with the master gone, but they felt, or I hope leastways, that some of your genius might have rubbed off on me over the years. We've had some outstanding successes, all due to your own methods, of course, modestly applied by myself.
Gratifying, gratifying.
It was all going swimmingly till about 2 weeks ago, in fact.
Oh?
An extraordinary case. This middle-aged woman from Cheltenham who tried to reach the spirit of her recently deceased husband through a medium. When she made contact, the spirit told her to give all her money to the medium. Now, of course, it looked like a hoax, but the medium refused to touch a penny of it. His reward, he said, would be in heaven. It completely flummoxed us.
You mean the medium actually refused to give?
Wouldn't touch a penny.
And the lady?
Determined to honor the wish of her recently departed husband, she insisted the money be handed over, hoax or no hoax, but the medium flatly refused to accept it, no matter what. Not knowing which way to turn, the lady came here to seek advice.
Well, I say, sounds like quite a pickle. Certainly foxes me. What would you suggest, Watson?
Would you excuse me for a moment?
Certainly.
Lestrade, will you come in here? Put your cuss on this fellow at once. He's an impostor.
I say, what's the meaning of
Are
it?
you sure, Dr. Watson?
Not a shadow of a doubt.
Now, Watson, I don't really think
Dr. Watson to you. And no, you don't think, certainly not very well, whoever you may be. Your replies to my questions were quite ingenious, a coconuts indeed. But a moment ago you dropped the fatal clanger when I told you about our latest case and you turned to me and said, "What would you suggest, Watson?" You showed yourself in your true colors. Sherlock Holmes would never in a million years have solicited my opinion. That was your fatal mistake.
Have a bit of pity, can't you? Why, I'm only a poor entertainer. A quick change eyes, an impersonator. At the Kid Carno Travelling Circus. We've been trying to find a spot in the house for 2 years. But nobody wants a quick change artist no more.
Oh, do you mean to tell me that you're an actor?
Why, this costume alone cost me £4. I thought if I could pull it off, I'd have enough for me and me miss to go steerage to Australia. Don't mean no harm. I'm just so hungry.
You'll be more than hungry when I get through with you. I'm so terribly sorry, Dr. Watson. I really thought...
All right, Inspector. All part of the day's work.
Can't you just look the other way and let me go, eh? I ain't done no one no harm.
Misrepresentation, false credentials, and imitating a British institution without a warrant. I hope they boil you in oil. Boil you in oil. Well, that's a good idea, isn't it? I shall write that down. Boil in oil. Right then.
But what about me wife again?
I hope they throw them into the same pot. Really, Dr. Watson, I'm terribly sorry. I mean, there were so many impersonators, and I really thought...
All right, Inspector. That's the cost of doing business.
Good day, Dr. Watson.
Have a bit of pity, can't you? God bless both of you! I hope the ghost of Sherlock Holmes haunts you till you dying day. Have a heart, Spectre. I'm a family man, eh? I've got a son, his name's Charlie.
Do you?
He turned 3 the other week, and I made him a splendid birthday party, didn't I?
What's with all the ruckus, Dr. Watson? I heard everything downstairs.
Another false alarm, I'm afraid.
No!
I told you not to get your hopes up, Mr. Hudson. A theatrical impersonator of some sort had down on his luck.
What a wicked world, Dr. Watson!
Full of wicked, wicked people, but life goes on and I've a rather important errand to run.
But, well, it's nothing really. Well, I've already made lunch.
Yes, but it really is right.
Sandwiches, actually.
Now, as lovely as that sounds, Mr. Hudson, it really is important that I confirm the whereabouts of an old friend, and I know I won't be able to consume a bite until he is where I think he is. Oh, and if the palace calls, take the number down and say I'll get back to them directly.
God, doesn't anybody care about sandwiches no more? It's a wicked world, I tell you. Wicked. Hello? What have we here? Oh, that's wicked. Oh, that's terrible. No, you can't. You can't, no. Maybe a little. Wicked. You're a naughty one. Oh, you take the high road, it'll take the low road. It'll all be in Scotland. For me and me true love, we'll never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond.
Sorry, Holmes. Just checking. Nothing like being absolutely sure. Hey, you taught me that. Oh, you agree? Blast!
Highly unreliable.
Who's there? Who is it?
Temper. It's an old friend.
I have a pistol. You'd better show yourself.
Pistols don't scare me. They never did. A bit redundant, that, don't you think?
Mercy. I had to remove you, Sherlock. I had to. I just couldn't live otherwise. I had to.
You took note of the exact word of the confession, Lestrade, I take it?
No fear, Mr. Holmes. I've got it all down.
But...
Come, Watson. You didn't really think in your heart of hearts that you could actually outwit me now, did you?
But I thought
Precisely what I'd have you think. Same height, similar bone curvatures, and, of course, the mark of the clamps applied to the wrist, which I was sure you would examine straight off.
You knew? All the time?
Not until last week, when Holmes came to me with the most incredible story I ever heard. One for the life of me I couldn't believe. That you had plotted to murder your good old friend. It was because I wouldn't believe it that we went through all that fuss to obtain your confession, hiring that music hall entertainer, exposing him, making you think everything was just like you left it.
But where?
Everywhere they said I was, old chap. Madagascar, Calcutta, Saint-Tropez. Particularly Saint-Tropez. I knew that the longer I was away, the more complacent you'd become. I knew you'd start to become careless, and that was my cue to attack. And so, a week ago, I reappeared to Lestrade, told him the entire story, and organized this two-part melodramatic charade which we have just concluded, with, I might add, predictable success.
That quick change artist? You?
I hired a performer. His cockney was a bit rusty, I'm afraid, but I knew that the only way to drive you back to the scene of the crime was to plant that seed of doubt.
Holmes, I don't know what to say. I don't know, Holmes.
Watson, you've only yourself to blame. Lestrade, you can leave now. Watson is quite helpless now. It took all the gumption he could muster for his one great gamble. That having failed, I don't think we ever need worry about him again. Do we, Watson? Go along, Lestrade.
You know, you should be ashamed of yourself, Dr. Watson. I'll never be the same again. You shagged me. Oh, you're nasty. Yeah, real nasty.
A touching fellow, Lestrade, despite his Neanderthal-sized brain.
We have nothing left to say to one another, Holmes. I've made my play, and I failed. I'm ready to take the consequences. Even life in prison would be a blessing, since I'd be free of you once and for all.
Not strictly speaking, Watson.
All I want is the oblivion I so richly deserve.
But would it be oblivion, old man? Within a matter of weeks, the more jaundiced of the yellow journalists would be onto you for your memoirs. You would be hounded to the grave, telling and retelling the plots you laid and mislaid, recounting your envy, ventilating your disgust, becoming more and more predictable and cantankerous in each succeeding Sunday edition. Oh, it would be pathetic, Watson. Pathetic.
Why are you trying to wring the last drops of blood out of me, Holmes? Isn't it enough you turned me into a criminal and now a lifelong convict?
It would be such a fiendish waste for all your years of commendable medical achievements to be banished at a stroke.
Does your spite know no bounds?
You're not catching my drift at all. What I'm saying, old man, is that your lifelong incarceration would serve no purpose whatsoever. It would make you even more miserable than you are at this very moment, and it wouldn't do me a blind bit of good.
What are you proposing?
Just this. I think it's a rather charitable offer.
What a charitable offer.
I will take you back.
Back?
Back to Baker Street. Back to the firm. Back to the fold. You will continue to chronicle events, although you will not figure in them as prominently as you previously did. You will continue to read the visitors, the press, the clients, all as you previously did. Of course, I could never let you out of my sight for a moment. Oh, that would be far too hazardous. And so I'll arrange a room for you in the basement of 221B Baker Street. Used to be the butler's, actually. It's a bit cramped. There are only a few windows, but once you've made it your own, put up your bottles and your charts, you'll find it quite jolly, I am sure. To the outside world, Holmes will have returned, and the old partnership of Holmes and Watson lovingly restored. We would know the truth, but the public need not.
You are suggesting the life of the walking dead, a fate far worse than imprisonment, a total and abject captivity to that man whom I despise most above all other men.
That's about the size of an old chap.
You must be mad to imagine that I would even consider such a thing.
Your alternatives are rather grisly. No more clubs, no more pubs, no more dinners at the Ritz, no more hansoms. No more vacations in the Highland, no more esteem, self, social or otherwise, and, of course, no honours.
Honours?
Surely you haven't forgotten Her Majesty's gracious offer.
You mean that you would let me?
Let you? Why, I would insist, old chap. Nobody could take that away from you. Why, it would be Sir John for all time to come. Sir John Watson, M.D., Ph.D., CPE, D.U.D., I.D.I.O.T., M.O.R.O.N., S.T.U.P.I.
I get it. I must admit, though, no matter how contemptible it sounds, when I was first informed of that honor, it was the first real flicker of happiness I've had in 50 years.
Then why deny it to yourself? After all you've been through, no man deserves it more. And how the old bosom would well with pride as you knelt before the heaving monarch, surrounded by a crowd of admiring colleagues, as the royal saber gently taps the shoulder of your rented morning suit. Arise, Sir John Watson!
No! No! Never! Never! I despise you, abhor you. To rid myself of you, I have risked ruin and degradation. It would make a mockery of everything to return now. To be your serf? Your slave? You're a hireling, even more debased than before. I won't do it, Holmes. Do you hear me? I won't do it, and you can't make me. You can't!
Hey. What's going on in here? Oh, you're nasty, eh? Real nasty.
Yes.
You know, in the other room, just there, I threw up in my mouth. Yeah, I did. Is everything all right?
Yes, Inspector, everything is quite all right. I think Dr. Watson is ready for you now. Am I right?
To Sir John, may he live a long and prosperous life, and may he always remember this lovely day. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bottoms up. It was just so lovely. There's no words for it, really. I've never been inside the palace before. Wasn't it just so lovely? Oh, and didn't the Queen just look so lovely?
A fine figure of a woman. A bit dwarfish, oh, but those lifts, they do wonders.
I didn't notice any lifts.
The royal hem had been sewn especially to conceal them, but there's a telltale list in the monarch's stance which gives it off. Didn't you notice as she began the dubbing, she was so far forward on her toes, she almost tapped you with the hilt?
I was rather preoccupied myself at the time.
Oh, and Dr. Watson, I've never seen you look as dashing as you did today.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Hudson. And I must say, in that coat, you too were quite dashing.
I managed to borrow it from my brother-in-law. He wore it to the coronation and we're just about the same size.
It was my understanding, Mr. Hudson, that the extra 6 shillings in last week's wage packet was specifically for new apparel for this gala occasion. I assume we can just subtract the unspent amount from next week's pay.
I was going to buy a new coat, Mr. Holmes, really, when my brother-in-law kindly offered.
Very generous too. The most practical solution all around. Good God! No need for alarm, Hudson. These are the first volleys of the Guy Fawkes celebration. We can expect fireworks well until dawn.
Oh, the big band! All that bother about bounded like that?
On the contrary, Guy Fawkes was the most explosive politician Britain has ever produced. Next to him, this lady had all the glamour of a tubercular cough.
And it's only just tea time. They start earlier each year. Hey, but Mr. Holmes, I still can't understand why you declined your knighthood.
I didn't want to steal your thunder, old chap. One knighthood in the family is quite enough for the moment.
Are you saying, Holmes, that it was an entirely selfless gesture?
I wouldn't go as far as to say that.
Then why in heaven's name did you
The
decline?
fact is, if you must know, I have it on the authority of the Lord Chamberlain that in the next lists it is even money that I shall be awarded a life peerage and be proclaimed Lord Holmes, Baron of Baker Street. And as I have every hope of living a long and active life, I thought it more prudent to simply pass this year.
Lord Holmes. God!
I actually did investigate the possibility of the latter title, but was informed that the monarch is not empowered to confer deific status on anyone. Alas.
Well, I must admit, even though it is just a piece of piffle, I do feel quite honored.
Oh, it'll up my station as well, Dr. Watson. When I go shopping for Sir John's table, oh, I won't be fobbed by no pig trotters or scrawny pork chops. No, it'll be prime cuts from now on, or I'll know the reason why. Oh, but Dr. Watson, are you sure you want to live in that pokey little room down in the basement? I can't for the life of me see why anyone would
Watson
want...
is a grown man, Hudson, and if he prefers the intimacy of a small and frugal abode in our basement, it is not for us to question it.
But it's so dark and musty down there. Oh, I don't mind the extra chores, Doctor, really, but why?
Now that the regal excitement has subsided and the cucumber sandwiches have been digested, do you think we might return to more mundane matters?
But it isn't every day we have a knighthood, you know.
No, but it is every day that the hall carpet needs brushing and the pantry needs cleaning. Neither of which have been done today, I believe.
You're as soft-hearted as ever, aren't you, Miss Downs? I thought after your time away you might have mellowed a little.
Wine mellows with age, Hudson, but people exposed to the same process over and over again only grow more sour. Oh, and speaking of wine, I wonder if you would be so good as to replace this in the larder?
wicked world. Can't even look at you.
Dear Hudson, looks exactly like an overstuffed saddlebag. When we entered the palace grounds, I half feared that the horse guards would lead him straight to the stables.
Sherlock, about that room in the basement.
Yes, Watson?
Well, it's really rather dark and dusty down there, and somebody appears to have bricked over both of the windows.
There's a perfectly adequate lantern.
Yes, I know, but it really is rather dank and musty and very hard to breathe.
Yes, much like a place I've known myself. We shall see, Watson. Perhaps in 9 or 10 months, we can consider the whole question of renovation. Perhaps one of the windows could be restored. The smaller one. Where in heaven's name is that tiresome old fool? You know, he really will be the death of me.
Shall I go?
No, I'll see to it. Must be those wretched Baker Street irregulars again. You know, they're always playing silly fools with their doorbells. Nothing would please me more than to take one of them by the scruff of the neck. I say, Watson, what's the matter?
The doorbell was a device of my own, Mr. Holmes. It enabled me to make my entry without obstruction. Mr. Hudson has been sent on a fool's errand, which, by my calculations, should take him about 20 minutes.
And to what do we owe the honor of this?
Before we proceed too far, I wonder if you'd be good enough to drop your pistol, the indentation of which is quite visible through your inside pocket. Many thanks. And now if you'd be good enough to oblige me by sitting in that chair, and you, Dr. Watson, over there.
Look, if it's money you're after...
No, thank you, Mr. Holmes. I have no material desires I cannot readily satisfy.
Since it's unlikely that you're an autograph seeker, I wonder just who you are and what the object of your visit might be.
I believe I can answer both questions at once, Mr. Holmes. My name is Damion Moriarty. You were both very closely acquainted with my father, I believe.
Really, Watson? This is too much! A joke is a joke, but this is an appalling display of poor taste.
I assure you, Holmes, I don't
We've
know.
already dispensed with the whole of this pointless farrago. Your Lewises, your Simons, your Damions, and if you think for a
I
moment...
tell you, Holmes, you both please oblige me by shutting your mouths!
My dear fellow, I don't know who you are or why you felt it necessary to play out this preposterous charade, but I can assure you, we have had our fill of this Moriarty nonsense and have absolutely no desire...
That was the first bird, Holmes, of 3 that will be fired this afternoon. Shots that I have no doubt will be heard around the world. But today, on Guy Fawkes Day, they will not be particularly audible. Who are you? You already have my name? My father was well known to both of you. Throughout his life, you stalked him from one city to another. And then, at Regenbourg Falls, finally hounded him to his death. When I received the news, I knew I would not rest until I avenged his death. But when it appeared, you had vanished off the face of the earth. My vengeance cooled. It would have been foolhardy news to take out your colleague, a minor act of retribution and a pointless one. And so, I abandoned the whole idea. But when you were miraculously rediscovered, I knew that God had restored to me my mission. He's back! I heard a voice say, the 2 of them together again. And now it's time to rid the world of them. Let it happen at their finest hour, when they're reaping their greatest honors and puffed up with pride. And that is why I'm here today.
Holmes, is it possible? Fact imitating fiction, Watson, happens every day. The real world is so impoverished of original ideas, it rifles art at every turn. no doubt it bolsters your self-esteem to pretend to be the son of the arch-criminal of the age. But as you surely must know, there is no record of a Moriarty offspring, male or female.
I am not obliged to read anything to you, Mr. Holmes. But to satisfy your curiosity, I shall tell you that I myself was unaware of my true identity until about 5 years ago, when my father, piqued by some inexplicable paternal sentiment, sought me out and revealed it to me. It's unbelievable. Moriarty had only
No
one.
doubt your father furnished proof of his identity.
You yourself know he did only have one distinguishing physical characteristic.
And that was...
An ingrown toenail on the small digit of his left foot. The very feature I had inherited from him.
There's no need.
Then you'll have to take my word for it, I'm afraid.
You see what all this darned biographical tampering has wrought? A full-blown, diabolical incongruity!
Don't call me an incongruity! I've had all the power I'm going to take from you! My mission is about to be fulfilled, and it will happen exactly the way my father would have wanted it. There is one cartridge in that pistol. Go on, take it. That is the bullet that will end your life, Dr. Watson. And you, Mr. Holmes, will be responsible for discharging it. That done, I will dispatch of you as promptly as possible. But, you see, I'm on a very tight schedule. Time is of the essence. Therefore, I must ask you, with no further ado, to dispatch your colleague.
Do you honestly believe that
If you don't, I shall, and rather more brutally than yourself. Take your choice.
All right, Holmes. It's providential it should end like this. My dear Watson. No, Holmes. It's just fate having the last laugh on both of us. But before I want you to know, those 18 months without you were the longest of my life. I hated you, I loathed you, I wanted to be free of you. I was certain of that. But the fact remains that throughout all those 18 months, I was quietly and unconsolably miserable. Perhaps when one hates someone as much as I did you, it turns into some kind of perverse love. I don't know. All I'm saying is that it seems quite inevitable and quite just.
Watson, when I realized in that contemptible old cellar that you truly intended to take my life, I vowed, with every atom of my being, to outwit you and survive. And often, during those long months on the run, when I thought back to your treachery, I thought I could happily rid myself of you forever. But now, like this, I find that...
All of this would be very touching if I had the slightest idea what the hell you were talking about. But the fact is, time's wasting. Holmes, I will give you to the count of 5 to pull that trigger, or else you shall go first.
You bastard! You truly are a Moriarty, aren't you?
Pull that trigger, Holmes, for if you don't, as God is my witness, I shall blow you to smithereens. 1!
It's all right, Holmes, I don't mind.
2!
This is the retribution I deserve.
3!
It's been marvelous, Holmes, all of it.
4!
I wouldn't have traded it for a barrel full of honors.
5!
Bravo, Mr. Walmsley! A trifle overplayed, a bit melodramatic here and there, but on the whole, quite convincing. Oh, get up, Watson. You're quite all right.
I didn't think much of your performance either, Mr. Holmes. That falls like something out of a third-rate rep.
But life is like a third-rate rep, Mr. Walmsley.
So you were trying to do in my brother, eh? My own brother, bedridden and spitting blood in the charity wards of Australia? Is that what you had hoped for? Sorry to disappoint you, Dr. Watson, but he is quite alive. No thanks to you. If Mr. Holmes hadn't sought him out in the slums of Brisbane and whisked him off to an American specialist, I dare say his consumption would have thoroughly consumed him by now. But I guess some gentlemen really are gentlemen. Got a clean bill of health now and he's resuming his career. As am I. I start a tour of Uncle Tom's Cabin in a fortnight's time.
It's only a minor role, but I'm understudying the lead, and who can tell? You've only yourself to blame, Watson. You can't just play fast and loose with people and not expect them to feel a touch vindictive. Oh well, it's all over now. Mr. Walmsley's had his satisfaction, and you're no worse for the wear. Although I must admit, I was quite touched by your remorse. Almost brought a tear to my eye. Well, let's put this whole ugly affair behind us and make up. Do tell Mr. Walmsley that he's forgiven.
May I go to my room?
Why, old chap, of course you can. You're not a prisoner here, you know. Oh, Watson, be a good chap and call Lestrade and Hudson in, and let us all drink to a long and happy life. Things to say.
First off, we'd like to thank our incredible backstage crew.
David Stroka on lights.
Adoram Lalezari on sound.
And we have backstage members Yair Fax, Ouriel Naghi, and backstage we have Gabriel Kiss and Daniel Combine.
And the manager of the backstage crew, the one and only Gabriel Naghi.
Not only would we like to thank Gabe for his dedication to drama, but we would also like to congratulate him on his recent acceptance to UCAT.
Gabe, being that this is your last year at YULA, we truly will miss you, and we thank you for all the wonderful work you put into this program.
It really is hard to imagine drama without you.
It's okay though. We have your brother to fill your shoes.
Yeah, we have your brother.
As most of you know, drama is a very time-consuming experience and really requires a great amount of time and dedication.
From memorizing lines,
to perfecting delivery,
from props,
to choreography,
and from lights and sound,
the set you see before you.
None of this could have been possible without the commitment of our very special director,
Ouriel.
A very special gift on behalf of the cast and crew.
I'd like to thank you for all your commitment to this program and everything you've done. Please put your name on it.
Thank you very much. This is a very special performance for me because it was 15 years ago that I was a freshman at YULA, sitting in the back of this room, watching this exact show. And I had no idea that YULA had a drama department, let alone that it was one of this caliber. And I was so inspired by what I saw that I made sure to look for the signs for the auditions for the next year. And it really changed the course of my life. And to that end, there's a couple things I'd like to say. I'd like to say, first of all, these guys work very hard. And they're all tremendous mensch. All of them, because you should know, everybody here is, they're all wearing kippas, and they all make brachot before they come back on stage to make sure that the food, it's not a joke. to make sure that everything is right, and really, honestly, there's a ton of work that goes into this, and they all maintain perfect 4.0 GPAs. And the truth is, this is after hours and hours of work, late in the evenings. We've calculated it. It's about 137 million hours we've worked so far. To that end, I also would like to say thank you to the administration who's been so supportive of us. Rabbi Glass is here, and Rabbi Lieberman. I'd also like to recognize my mentor, Peter Faber, who directed this show 15 years ago. He continues to be my friend and my mentor, my director, really. And really, I can't do any of this without the love and support of my wife, who's in the audience tonight. I thank her from the bottom of my heart, and I thank you all again. Guys, take one more bow.